Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 362 of Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. I'm privileged with this show to do much more than just provide an oral history of Stargate. During the 5 years that we've been doing this, we've gathered many friends and many stories along the way. And at this stage, we are very interested, I am very interested, and I know many of you are, in the projects that they are working on that have surrounded them since Stargate. Armin Shimerman, we have been privileged to have him on at least twice now. And one of the things that we haven't given enough attention to, I think, is the process of writing through the stories that he has been telling through his Illyria series. And I wanted someone who could go toe to toe with him, who has been in the Hollywood sphere and can speak to that. So for this episode in the chat, there's not going to be any Q&A from the audience. It's just going to be between him and our guest host. For today, it is Diana Botsford, whose storytelling career spans TV, film, and prose. She co-wrote the fan favorite Rascals for Star Trek The Next Generation, producing over 1,000 half hours of animation, including classics like Inspector Gadget, Heathcliff, and Spiral Zone, and contributed visual effects for films including Dusk Till Dawn and Terminator 2. As an author, Diana penned the Stargate SG-1 novels Four Dragons and The Drift, plus recent work for anthologies like Double Trouble and Heritage. As a professional at Missouri State University, she created and led their award-winning screenwriting program for nearly 2 decades. With her move to Michigan, she continues to teach and coach writers through online and conference workshops while developing new fiction and media projects. Diana, thank you so much for hosting today.
David, thank you so much for coming up with this very cool idea. What a great way to explore what it means to be a storyteller. Storytelling has so many meanings to so many people. And usually, it pricks an image of someone with a book reading to a group, or if you go back far enough in time, the idea of our first leaders and wise people sitting at the fire, regaling their community with tales of adventure and fables with meanings, and that would really help navigate people through lives with their morals of their stories and gives us reasons to imagine, to hope, to wonder. So flashing forward a few thousand years, and the definition of storyteller has most certainly changed. Authors and screenwriters, to be sure, but also actors are a critical component to telling a story. One of the things that they often tell you in television is that a character is born of 2 people, the writer and the actor. So to have Armin here today to share his journey, which, of course, for our Stargate fans here today is Anteaus of the Nox, and then, of course, Quark in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and the Mayor on Buffy, and I could go on and on. I mean, he's done a lot of things since with video games and appearances in The Rookie, and I think there's even an upcoming film. But today, we get to talk writing and the journey, and I'm really excited to hear what Armin has to say, to discuss his work with the media tie-in novel, the DS9 novel, The 34th Rule, and then from that, expanding on to short stories, and his fabulous alternate history trilogy, Illyria, with Betrayal of Angels, Sea of Troubles, and Imbalance of Power. Armin, it really is a treat and an honor to meet you and to have you here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you very much. And that was a wonderful introduction. I just need to correct one thing. I didn't play the mayor on Buffy. I played the principal. My good friend Harry Groner played the mayor.
You're right. That is my bad. I apologize. It's been a couple of years. Just a couple.
Quite all right. Harry won't mind.
Yeah. Did the principal get his head bit off? That was the mayor.
By the mayor. By the
Yes,
mayor.
that's right. By the mayor. Lucky you.
Yes, lucky me, because Harry Groner is one of my dearest friends. So it was very nice to have to be lunch for a friend.
So you've been very fortunate from the birthplace of writing for your journey as a storyteller, beyond acting into writing. You've worked with Joss Whedon.
Yes.
You worked with Ira Stephen Bear and Robert Wolf and
Wonderful
Ron T.
writers,
Moore.
wonderful, incredible writers. Jane Esperson on Buffy as well,
Yes.
incredible writer. I've worked with some incredible writers and good writers, by the way, in digital games as well. Have written me some incredible scripts and characters.
There's some amazing storytelling that's going on in video games this day.
Right.
Absolutely. And we're starting to see, and hopefully we'll have more time later to talk about it, universities are starting to embrace teaching this as a form of storytelling as well. So it certainly runs the gamut. So, but let's talk about your journey. You started as an actor. You spent years embodying characters written by all these fabulous writers, but now you're the voice behind the words. How did you discover your authorial voice? And was there a moment when you realized you weren't performing on the page anymore, but you were creating?
Well, before I was an actor, as a very young man, I wanted to be a writer and wrote a number of short stories and poetry, some verse. I was lucky enough at 13, so it doesn't really count, at 13 to be awarded for my verse writing. So I've always been interested in writing. Acting was not my first advocation. And what happened was I found out that while you're doing a series, you have a lot of time on your hands. And so I would go back to the trailer, turn on the TV, was nothing to watch, and I began to sit down and write, and found that to be enormously creative, and I used my time wisely. My first book, which is a series of books called The Merchant Prince, took me about, I would say, 2 or 3 years to complete. And that's a science fiction series. It basically is Quark in the future. Quark is in the future, but based on a historical character, a man that has been my leading character for all my books. This is an incredible human being called Dr. John Dee, who lived in Shakespeare's time. For those of you who aren't aware of my background, besides being an actor and a writer, I'm also a Shakespearean scholar and teacher, and I've taught at the university level and other levels as well. So this man, John Dee, was an inspiration, and I began to write about him via science fiction, which is the Merchant Prince series. And then while I was writing that, I thought I should be true to my character and put him in his real time, which is 1580s, and write some novels about that. And that's where Illyria came from.
So, how do you think your work in the visual medium as an actor helped or hindered your writing style as an author? I was reading your reviews, and there was one that really showed that you bring all of it to bear when you write your books. You had a review that says, I am reading Betrayal of Angels and I'm on chapter 11. I like where the story is going. Armin tells the story in a way that puts you in the scene and you can almost hear the sounds that are being described.
Thank you. And thank the person who wrote that. Because I am a Shakespeare scholar, I'm enormously familiar with the times, the period, the world of that time. And so part of my agenda was to write books using the information that I had gleaned over a lifetime. And if this person feels that way, then I succeeded in what I was doing. But I use all my experience as a scholar to put into the books. And I imagine I use some of my experience as an actor. As an actor, one does the same thing. One takes the experiences one's had in life and draw upon them to round out your characters.
Yeah, there's something very visceral about the way you write. It's very immersive. And I thought this was a terrific little review quote because it really fit what you're doing.
Thank you.
As an actor, it's fun. Acting is fundamentally about listening and reacting, having scene partners to bounce off of, to surprise you, to keep you in the moment. But now as an actor, you have to be all the characters in that dynamic.
Right.
How did you adapt from reacting to other actors to creating every voice in the conversation?
It's enormously difficult. It's
Yeah.
enormously difficult for someone who's used to bouncing off of other actors, as you just said. It's a very lonely, isolated experience. In my case, facing a computer screen and trying to figure out how people are going to react. In some sense, it's like addressing a play or a script right before you do it. In the case of the theater, before you start rehearsals, and you sort of think, well, maybe this character will react this way, which would force me to do something else. Because the litany, the creed of the type of acting that I do is that all life comes from the other actor. So whatever the other actor provides, I'm responding to that. That the other actor inspires me to speak, to move, to react in whatever way I'm going to do. But when you're writing, you have no other person there. You have the image of what you're creating in your head, and you're trying to visualize what is that character doing and how is he affecting the other people around him. It's very lonely, very isolated, and when you're done, enormously thrilling.
So, what kind of scene do you find to be the most fun to write versus the most challenging? For instance, for me, for like a stunt scene, I literally have to like use Barbie dolls or little stick figures, or I have to draw maps to really lay it all out. Whereas, a talking scene or a intimate scene that uses props of some sort, that tends to be the most comfortable for me, but every writer is different. What scenes have you found to be the most challenging versus what scenes are the most come with the most ease for you?
The heightened scenes where important things are happening are the most challenging because you want to get them right. The easiest scenes for me are the comic scenes because I'm very familiar with that and comfortable with that. So those, but when you're dealing with dramatic scenes that are going to change the arc of the novel or of the characters, those are the hardest, and I want to get them exactly right, and for me, someone said this to me years ago, and it's absolutely true. Writing is rewriting. So you go back, you look at it, and no, that doesn't work, and you go at it again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until finally you think I've written something of worth now. Now I think I can move on and leave that alone. But indeed, I may think that, and then 3 weeks later go back and read it again and go, no, it's not right yet.
I mean, part of the whole process with screenwriting or game writing, anything for the visual medium versus writing a novel, is that collaborative versus solitude challenge, as you say. Um, there are some for the people that are joining us today to listen and to watch. There are certain processes in place for the solitary author, like a critique group, which has both its advantages and its disadvantages, do in the sense that if you piecemeal it out, you can get set off in the wrong direction with the wrong feedback versus keeping the door closed for the first draft, like Stephen King would advise. Do you utilize any writing groups? Do you have fellow critiquers that you work with at all? Or are you door closed, totally 100%
Well,
focused
I've
on?
experienced both. When I was writing Merchant Prince, my publisher teamed me up with a wonderful writer named Michael Scott, an Irish writer, who's created probably more than 100 novels. And so Michael and I would go back and forth, sort of talking about what we were going to write. And the process that we used was we had formed an outline of what that story was about. And he, if I may tell this story, I think originally the publisher and Michael Scott assumed that having created the outline, I would sit back and let him do most of the writing. And he wrote the first chapter and was kind enough to send it to me for me to look at. And I didn't like it, and I rewrote it. And Michael, as I said, is a much more prolific author than I am. He got back to me and was very pleased with what I had written. And so the process that we used was, after that, was he would sketch out a chapter, maybe a page or two,
Fine.
and then I would flesh it out. I would make it, if we're just talking about numbers, I would flesh it out from 2 pages to 12 pages. And that's the way we worked. And that was a very collaborative process. In the next book of the Merchant Prince series, Michael had to go somewhere else, and Chelsea Yarbro became my co-writer. And she, assuming that I was not going to be very helpful to her in her writing, just began to write this novel that had my name on it. And it began, and she would, like Michael, would send me her chapters, and I would, like Michael, would send my edits, which she never incorporated into her story. And it became two divergent, different stories, the novel she was writing and the novel I was writing. And eventually I had to go to the publisher and say, you've got to choose. Whose novel are you going to publish, hers
Oh,
or
yeah.
mine? And he was kind enough to say, no, we're going to go with yours, Armin. And so that was a process that wasn't as collaborative as my one with Michael Scott's. And then that too is a trilogy, The Merchant Prince. And so the third novel, I just decided I'm just going to write this myself, which I did, and that was a very creative and happy experience for me. So, as you said about Stephen King, I closed the door on everybody else and just took over the reins of writing. When I started Illyria, the trilogy Illyria, I was already comfortable and confident that I could write by myself, and did.
But did you, after you were done with your first draft, did you have beta readers? Did you
I had my
utilize any?
wife. I had my wife. My wife is very smart and a prolific reader, and so she would read it and
That's
say,
helpful.
here's this. I did have a lady who did look over my work. She was hired by the publisher to do that, and she was very helpful. I didn't always agree with her, but she was helpful. So between those two, I had some feedback, but unlike the Merchant Prince experience, I was confident enough and egoistic enough to think I can do this by myself. But they
And
were
have
helpful. But they were
ways.
helpful. The two ladies were helpful.
Yeah. Now, going back a little bit in time with the media tie-in novel for DS9 that you were involved in, the 34th Rule.
Yes.
So, having written media tie-in novels myself, I understand that there's just 10 more layers to the process, to the point where you're literally having to tell the studio, look at this episode at this time code because he said this and she said that, and that's why I'm saying what I'm saying now. Having gone through that, talk to us a little bit about your experience writing 34th Rule. It was a fun book.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you. It is a fun book, but I didn't
Yeah.
write it. I didn't write it. David wrote it. So let me tell you the background on this. David and I and Eric,
David George.
David George and Eric Sitwell, wanted to write an episode for Deep Space Nine. We went in and spoke to Ira about pitching this idea, and for whatever reason, Ira decided not to go with it. As we left the building, we were all very disappointed. And David, who had written another Star Trek novel, David George, he suggested we turn it into a novel. Eric wasn't interested in writing a novel. David and I sat down and worked out the outline for the novel, and that was it for me. I had assumed the experiences I've just described to you would happen again. That he would write a chapter and I would overlook it and make changes. But David took it upon himself, and I'm happy that he did. He took it upon himself to write the whole novel, never really once letting me in on the process. And so, I, good or bad, and I think it's good. except to work on the outline and to give my character's background to David, and this we did in the outline sessions uh, of figuring out how Quark and Raman and Nog would react in this situation. It was a topic that I was very much interested in. That's why we wanted to sell it to Deep Space Nine. So sorry to deflate this question, but I really didn't write that novel.
Oh, but it's interesting to hear there are so many roads that lead to Rome, as it were. So to hear,
And I'm sure that
uh,
David had to go through all those hoops, not only with Paramount, but with Pocket Books as he was creating the novel. And he went on to write many more novels for Pocket Books.
yeah, the Star Trek novels have done incredibly well, unequivocally. I mean, it's the media tie-in. Have you considered writing any more media tie-ins for DS9 or for Stargate or for anything else?
No,
Buffy also?
no, that's not where my desires are. My desires are to to write really about what I know. I mean, isn't that what they say about writers? You should write what you know. Yes, I'm familiar with the very start of the science fiction programs that I've appeared on. But for me, I live in Elizabethan times, so that's what's most familiar to me.
Have you written any short stories that take place in that world?
No, I haven't. I wrote short stories as a young man, as a teenager, but no, I haven't done that since. I like the long form better. However, it's not writing, but it's comparable. I have directed a lot of Shakespearean plays, and in a
Mm.
sense, you are writing there too. You're writing performance. You're not writing lines. Shakespeare wrote the lines, although occasionally you can change a word.
Yeah, you can ask Kenneth Branagh about that.
Yeah. And I don't mind doing that. And I think sometimes you have to do that. And I could go into a lecture about that, which I won't do now. And so you're writing what the actor is going to do as far as choices and performance in a Shakespearean play. And you yourself, as the director, have a vision of what the world should be, because after all, you can put Shakespeare in any time and in any place. And if it works, it's glorious. If it doesn't work, it's a complete fiasco. But that's what you do. You write a scenario that is performance rather than language.
So it's a different kind of media tie-in novel in a way, right? Because
That's
it's
right.
somebody else's sandbox and you're playing in their
Right.
sandbox.
You're playing within the parameters that they've given you. But you,
Right.
in Shakespeare's case, and I'm sure with a lot of other writers as well, you can have a lot of leeway as long as you don't defile the sandbox.
Right. That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about the industry in general right now? And not just the television film industry or gaming. I mean, all the venues, all the roads that lead to Rome as far as storytelling are concerned. There's a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of upside down going on. Where do you see yourself as a storyteller? What roads do you see yourself going on next to tell your next tale?
Well, as an actor, I'm dependent upon someone providing me a script and asking me to join their cast. And in that case, I get the script, and the writers are the primary creators on in TV or film. But the actors are the interpretive artists. We take the language and the situation, and we add our own experiences to that and our own choices to that. And we do our best to fulfill the writer's vision, adding little spices, nuances of what our own life experience has taught us. Now, the business is indeed in turmoil. Writers have just, not recently, but in the near past, went on strike to make sure that they were protected, so that AI didn't take over their work. As it is, producers, studios have curtailed their time at work, causing the writer's room to be smaller or keeping them on for a certain amount of time and then firing them because they don't need them anymore. This is a horrible, horrible situation. And I one of the hats I've worn in my life is a union activist. I was on the union board for 7 years while I was writing. Um, and I'm very happy the writers got what they needed in the strike. And one thing I've learned as a union activist is that strikes and negotiations are just one step in the pathway forward. It's never a be all to end all. It's just the temporary fix until we get to the next negotiation. But what they did in the last negotiation was a great stride forward. AI
Yes,
is
and
a threat to writers.
Governor Newsom just signed a bill about not replacing an actor with AI, and hopefully that's a step forward as well too. On the author side, I don't know. I would suspect you were part of the Anthropic settlement because I noticed that you have a very nice, clear copyright on your books, the Illyria series. And Anthropic, thanks to the Authors Guild and the Science Fiction, the Professional Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, and a few other associations, Anthropic now has to do this huge payout. Anthropic is Claude, the AI Claude, which is it's actually it's a decent AI for fact finding stuff, although it does hallucinate too. But they scanned in like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of books. Your books, my books were on that list unequivocally. And now they're having to do a payout to anyone who had a proper copyright on their books. I don't know.
Well, thank you
I
for that.
will
I didn't know
email
that. I
you
know that AI had scanned
there
my
is
books.
a search engine to confirm if you're on that list or not. I will email that to you after we finish talking.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That'd be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to, it's going to take awareness. I think though the other half of the equation is how do we as storytellers rise to the circumstances of the situation and ensure that we're still given avenues to tell fresh stories. One of the things we're seeing, for instance, and Screen Actors Guild has been getting into this, is the vertical storytelling format, which is the short little iPhone
Hmm.
videos.
Hmm.
They're starting to get into that. I'm wondering, as authors, how do we compete now with the millions of fan fiction short stories and everything else going on to entice people to want to read at a time that we used to have 80% of this country used to read and now only 20% reads. How do we get them to the table reading another book?
I don't know. It's something I've thought about for a great long time. It saddens me that people do less reading than they used to. When I teach, I sometimes make literary references, and I'm agog at the fact that my students have no awareness of what that is. It saddens me a great deal. I don't know how you get people to read. I think there are too many attractions, whether on iPhones or streaming services or whatever, and people just want something immediate. They don't want to take the time to dive into an author's world and experience that glory that a talented writer can give a reader. It is a phenomenal experience, and the only way to get people to read is for you and I and others to talk about it and tell them how good it is. We have to be the good reviewers that tell people, go to this book, go to this poem, go to this literary work in order to enjoy it. As a Shakespearean scholar and director, I see the fall off of audiences who are no longer interested in language. All they really want are visual things. And that's one of the things that have happened in our culture. You started this program by saying about, storytellers around fires and people fascinated about the worlds that the bards told in front of the fires. And it was a linguistic thing. Shakespeare himself talks about listening to a play rather than seeing a play. And our culture is visually oriented, not
Yes.
orally oriented. So we want to see things. That's what grabs people is visual impact. And books don't necessarily do that. They're just ink spots on the page. So the only way you're going to enjoy a novel is by reading it and experiencing it and allowing yourself to fall into that world.
So there's a sociological term called the cool fire that refers to television. The idea being that thousands of years ago, we sat around the fire at the end of the day and these stories were told. And now we sit around the TV set and these stories are told. And there's still, as I said, there's morals and fables and, it hits us on an emotional level. I have found there tends to be more interest in reading a book if it's known that it's going to be adapted or it has already been adapted, because it's kind of a sure thing in a way because of what you said, this interest more in the visual medium. So there's certainly some truth
Yeah,
to that.
it is just a disappointment, and maybe it's just a generational thing. Maybe that's what's going to happen. I don't know, but it's sad. I mean, during the course of centuries, things have been lost, and I hope reading isn't one of them, but it's a possibility.
I think part of that is this country versus other countries, though. If you look at
Maybe so.
Finland, for instance, they have a phenomenal literacy rate.
Right. When you visit Ireland, for instance, there are no pictures really of sports figures. It's all pictures of the writers, the Irish writers that have come out of Ireland. They are the heroes in Ireland, and it's probably true in Finland and other countries where they have a great respect and interest and fascination with writers and their writing.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of truth that the funny thing, though, is there's a lot of study. It's not funny, but there's been a lot of studies done that have shown how the brain benefits from reading versus too much screen time. I've
Right.
been ill for a few weeks, so I have just been watching TV. But last night I dove into a new book and I slept better last night than I have slept in a long time. And I know it's because of the quietness of reading.
Right. And to
So,
add to that, my wife, for instance, and there are many people like my wife who have a problem reading on Kindle. They just don't, they want to feel the page. They want to be able to
interesting.
turn the page. They want to be able to go back to the page and not the screen, but the page. There's a tactile delight in turning the pages. I don't have a problem with Kindle. I don't care how you read a book, as long as you read the
To
book.
read it.
But there are many people who say I can't read a book on a screen.
There's another issue behind that too. I have dyslexia, as did Octavia Butler, the great science fiction author. The invention of the Kindle was the greatest gift for me because
Why?
I can literally sit there and just read so fast now, and it's remarkable. And I collect science fiction books. My dad had a big collection, and I inherited some of it, and I keep adding to it all the time of autograph books. And I love the feel of a book, as you say. But if I try to read one, my eye will just start going over here.
Mhm.
I will not, it'll take me 3 hours to read a page. A nice big Kindle, I'm still reading it, I'm enjoying it, but one paragraph at a time. So, it's whatever, again, the more roads that lead to Rome, the better.
That's
But
right.
there is something in the neuroscience of reading versus screen watching that's significant. And I think as authors, I think it's up to us to try to figure out how to get everybody back to the table. I do not have the answers, but it is certainly a challenge that we need to pick up and do something with. I'm not sure what that is, though.
I'm not sure either, and it saddens me, and I'm sure it saddens you, and it saddens a lot of people. But if that's lost, oh my God, what will humanity be
You
like?
know.
We will never.
And with all these
One of the great
emojis,
things
it's like
about
looking at
writing,
hieroglyphics,
yeah, one of the great things about writers is they often will refer back to pieces of wisdom that other writers have come up with. It will inspire them. They might include it in their works. I certainly do. And if that wisdom is lost, oh my God, civilization is at risk. So
So who are some of your most, who inspired you to set you on the course as a storyteller?
Well, certainly Shakespeare. That's number one on my list. My wife says I only live in the 1600s, so all the writers that came out of that time, Marlowe, Greene, other people, th that is for me the most fascinating. There's a lot of modern writers and whose names I've just forgotten, but that I enjoy as well. For me, because I'm a theater actor, there's a lot of playwrights that are just astounding. You read them, and you don't know how they came up with that.
You know, it's funny, I just realized Far Beyond the Stars, the episode where you played a science fiction, you all play science fiction writers. My father was part of that circle. So I knew all those people as a very little girl. So that for me, they were I love Shakespeare too, of course. And who doesn't like to, Henry V is my favorite. Who doesn't like to crack open a play and read a little bit for a little bit? But those sci-fi writers of which you and your fellow actors emulated, that was quite a treat because you got it. You understood their influence on on modern literature and the literary scene.
Yeah,
So I,
I've forgotten the very famous character my character was modeled off of. Very famous. He was a short, irascible science fiction writer. I'm sure you know who he is, and I've just forgotten
yeah, it
his.
wasn't Isaac Asimov. That was played
No, it
by
wasn't
Miles
Asimov.
Bryan.
It was.
Uh,
Uh, he had a reputation for not being comfortable to be around. Um,
was that Ray
and
Bradbury?
it wasn't Brad. Who? Yes, Harlan Ellison.
Oh, Harlan, yeah.
Yes, see, that's the reaction exactly. Um, but he wrote great stuff, and he had, high
Good.
ideals, and that episode of Deep Space Nine is the cast's favorite.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, our audience will say, "Well, it's your favorite. You got out of makeup." That's not the reason. It's that we pulled back the curtain and said, "Really, the heroes of our show, in addition to the actors, are the writers. It's the writers who are the primary artists in this enterprise." And we got to pull back the curtain and show you the writers, not our writers, but other science fiction writers. And it is our favorite episode.
Yeah. It's for many, 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 many reasons.
Yes,
The
many reasons.
layers just go on forever. We could spend 2 hours just talking about that episode and the work that all of you did in it. Um, so back on industry for a minute from the business side, as far as being a author versus dealing with the guilds, what was the most surprising part for you business wise as far as being an author is concerned?
Well, for me, the hardest part, and it was just serendipity that it happened, the hardest part was selling the book. I had written it, I had edited it, I was happy with it, but I had no experience whatsoever in how do you sell a book. The Merchant Prince was an assignment. The publisher came to me and said, "I'm going to team you up with Michael Scott, and you're going to write The Merchant Prince." So that was already sold. It was already taken care of. So when I started Illyria, I just did it for my own creative reasons. And then when I finished it, I thought, now how do I sell this? How do I get this out on the market? That was a high hurdle to straddle, and eventually, and I'm a person who must have an enormously enlarged luck gene. Luck just happened, and Jumpmaster Press came my way and said, "You send us a copy of your book, and we'll see if we'll publish it or not." And 3 weeks later, they said, "Yes, we'll do that."
Yeah, it's not Field of Dreams writing a book.
No, no, it's not. No. If you write it, they will come. No, and, and um, no, it's not. But if I may tell this totally tangential,
Please
and I'm
do.
just bragging now, I apologize. So the
No.
man who wrote the film, Field of Dreams, not the author of the book, but the man who wrote the film, is Phil Alden Robinson. And when
Yeah.
he came back from Iowa, where he shot the film, he gave me my first computer, and that computer is what he wrote Field of Dreams on. And there was a message on the computer when I opened it up that said, "Armin, I'm so glad to be out of Iowa." But yes, it's not Field of Dreams.
Oh, it's not. It's you can write the most magnificent thing, but I've seen this in the television and film industry too, where I have seen scripts just never get made that are genius. I've also seen scripts that were about two nuns in Idaho end up being about New York, two cops in New York City.
Sure.
This is all part of the process, but it as far as publishing is concerned, it is a different animal. It's you do have more control of your vision. You are the property master. You are the production designer. You are the costume designer. You are those things. Maybe not 100%, but 99.9%.
Right. That's
So,
absolutely true. You're in total control, more than even directing a play. You
oh
are in
yeah,
total control. Everything is comes out of your imagination, out of your vision, and yes, that 0.1% can come from the editor, but most of
or
it,
your wife.
or your wife. But most of it comes from you, and you have total control. And if it succeeds, thank you, you did it. If it fails, it's your fault.
Yes, definitely. So the first time you got your first box of books
Mhm.
for a book that you yourself you completely the Illyria books you wrote. What was that experience like for you?
Um, Joyous. It's like getting my first good review on Broadway. It's joyous, just joyous. In addition to that, getting my first box of books was to walk into a bookstore and see my book on sale on a shelf. That was equally as joyous. Um, it's a little bit egotistical, but it's lovely. It sort of says, "Congratulations, here's a good review." It's not a review, but it's something that says you succeeded. You succeeded.
It's a landmark,
It
definitely.
it is a landmark, and
And it
I recommend it to anyone who's out there. Whether you have to write a book first to do it, but that moment, we see again. I'm making a bad analogy, but we see the joy in actors when they receive awards for their performances, and how excited they are. It's exactly the same thing for a writer.
yeah, it's very special. And it really is kind of like a lamppost in the legacy of you as a storyteller. And I mean, this kind of leads into my next question. I mean, your Stargate character is going to live in reruns forever. Cork, the principal at Buffy's high school, all of these characters, the work that you've done in video games. You know, right now there are people in different homes all over the world playing games, hearing your voice. Okay. But now, having shifted from being part of someone else's legacy to building your own legacy, your own world that is somewhere somebody's cracking open the book, taking a sip of their tea, moving the page. How does that feel for you? That shift.
Well, it's part of the reason I think I started to write was to do
Mm.
that. As proud of I as I am with my on-camera performances, I didn't want to die with my tombstone saying Quark. I wanted to leave something to the world that I could be extra specially proud of. I'm proud of my work on TV, but I wanted to do something beyond that. And so writing was my way of okay, maybe if I write one good sentence that people will remember, or if I write a book that intrigues people, entertains them, and in my case, again, I'm influenced by an author in the 1600s who said that literature must both entertain and educate, and that's what Illyria is about entertaining and educating at the same time. So if I can educate and entertain, and somebody learns from that experience, then I think my being on this planet for a short period of time might have been worthwhile.
You're here. So what's next for you, Armin? What are you working on next?
Well, as an actor, I'm doing a play right now outside Mullingar, but as a writer, I've started. I'm not sure if it's a play or a novel yet, but I have started writing again something about Shakespeare, um, um, which and the theme is Shakespeare didn't know that he was going to be on everybody's lips 400 years later. He didn't know that. He was simply a playwright. And at that time, playwrights weren't esteemed. Actors weren't esteemed. Both dramatic playwrights and actors were not allowed to be buried in sacred ground because they were thought to be infidels, to be irreligious. So he couldn't possibly know what his writing would mean to future generations. So I'm writing this story about Shakespeare at the end of his career, wondering whether any of it was meaningful, any of it worthwhile. Because as a man, the little that we know about him as a man, he sacrificed a great deal of his social life in order to create these plays. Because he was not only the writer of these plays, he was the actor in these plays, he was the producer of these plays. Um, uh, Lots of other things connected to these plays and sonnets. There's no way for him to know whether or not it was important. And of course, the reader knows that it's important because they know. But I want Shakespeare as a character to to worry about his importance in the world. And I'm writing about this because I'm of a certain age now, where I wonder if any of the things that I have done artistically are valuable. You're kind enough to mention about the books and about my performances on TV. Thank you. But I still have a little voice in the back of my head says, "You're still an infidel. You're still irreligious." Uh,
Imposter syndrome.
yeah, is it, did you make a difference? And so I want to take those voices and put them into Shakespeare's head and
Mm.
have him deal with it. And um, and I'm not sure if he ever realizes that his work will be important. I only know that he has questions. That's all.
So that is something I would love to read, having enjoyed reading Shakespeare since I was a child. But also, as part of your legacy, is your academic work influence? I mean, just sharing perspective and giving to generations of people to help their perspectives as they're learning about one of the greatest storytellers that ever lived.
Right.
Do you want to
And
talk a
thank you.
little bit about
That
that?
I'm very proud of that because that I do see making a difference because that's immediate. I can see that. I can see that people, primarily what I teach is Shakespearean actor to Shakespearean actor. I teach Shakespearean acting to Shakespearean actors. And I can see their understanding. I can see the light bulbs going off in their heads as they get it. And I know because they've told me and I've seen it, they use those light bulbs in their own performances. And I know as an actor that the mentors that I had influenced me to perform a certain way because of what I learned from them. And so, in a sense, those mentors are are being transmitted to my students, and they in turn will transmit that further on to the next generation, and so to that extent, I see that I have an influence that is beneficial for future generations. Uh, there's nothing that makes me happier than having a good class and watching a student or a group of students improve and get what I'm talking about. Because
And I would, yeah.
I'm very proud of what I teach. My students are very complimentary about saying, "Why didn't I ever know this before?" Because most people will, now I'm going to teach a little. Most people will say, "I don't understand Shakespeare," or they'll call it Old English, which they're totally wrong about that. And it's because the actors don't know how to communicate the language in the way that Shakespeare thought of the language. And the trick is to teach actors to think that way. And when they think that way and approach the language that way, their performances are exponentially clearer, more understandable than ever before. And when I see that, when I'm sitting back in the class and watching that, my heart jumps for joy.
As a professor myself, I absolutely understand the it's almost an addiction to the light bulb going off in your student. It's an extraordinary experience. It's a gift to give. And I'm sure as a professor, you've also received back. You're never too, what's it saying? You're never too old to learn or too young to teach.
That's
So
absolutely true. And I have gotten back, I'm sure you have as well, when a student comes up to me and says, your class was the best class I had at college, or when I see a performance of one of my students and I go, and I see them using the techniques that I instilled in them, as you said, it's just thrilling. It's thrilling.
that's a hell of a legacy unto itself, Armin.
That's right.
Really. Thank you for just, I know you need to go. You said you had to boot, but this has been an extraordinary experience.
Thank you.
To,
Yes, it has. Thank you for the lovely questions and your complete understanding. Thank you.
yes, it's been great. And I will send you that link. I
Thank
promise
you.
I
I
will email
appreciate
you
that.
about that. So thank you. Break a leg with your new play. Is
Thank
it
you.
going to, when is it going to be
We are performing right
performing?
now, so I don't know when our segment airs, but our play is playing until November the 9th at a theater in Los Angeles called The Skylight. The play is called Outside Mullingar by John Patrick Shanley. It's a four-character show. It's an incredibly good play to be doing at this time because it offers joy and hope. And
Yes.
I think the theme of the play is that when one door closes, another one opens, and it's both funny and touching, and people cry, and the cherry on top is I get to work with my wife. She and I are two of the four actors, so it's just glorious, and we have a matinee today. Yeah,
Well, break a leg. And
thank you,
thank you so much for being with us today. This has been an absolute treat.
thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
And thank you both. I really appreciate you, Armin, for coming back to speak with us further. And it means a lot to have you. And my ears just open wide when you have something new to say about the that time period. There's so much of our history is so rooted in that era. So thank you for always being willing to share.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, if I may, just for a moment, one
Please.
of the things that came out of that era is the St. James Bible.
Wow.
And God knows, how much our world is affected by that. So there's even the thought that Shakespeare may have written one of the Psalms in the King James Bible.
Wow.
I didn't.
No proof of that, but that's a rumor.
Would you really be surprised though? I wouldn't.
It's possible. It's not likely. I'll tell you why. Because of the timeline. Shakespeare died in 1616. The Bible came out in 1623. It's possible. I mean, they took years and years and years to write the King James Bible, so it's possible. But and again, because he was an actor, a playwright, or he wouldn't call himself a playwright. He would call himself a poet. Um, these were all aristocratic members of the church. I don't think they would ask an actor to write a psalm.
Well,
But who
especially if
knows?
they had the perspective that you were talking about, where they considered them infidels, basically.
That basically, yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't think that, but there's some hints. They're you have to take it with a grain
Cool.
of salt, but there's some hints, and it's nice to think that perhaps he did write one psalm. So
Wow. Wow. Well,
Very
thank
cool.
you for sharing that. I mean, just to go and take another look at it and just say, look, what if, what are the similarities in there? That's really cool. So, Diana, thank you so much. This was a
yes,
It's
treat.
been a
thank you,
treat.
thank
So,
you,
putting two
and
academics
good luck with
together.
your teaching as well, Diana.
Thank you. I'm like you. I love watching the light bulbs go off. It's a high. It's a
It's a
drug.
high. Yeah.
Really. It's incredible. And it is a legacy because I still stay from my teaching. I used to teach at Missouri State University before I moved out of there. We lived there for a while, LA, Missouri State, and now Michigan. But I still stay in touch with like over 75 of my former students thanks to the digital realm. And it's just such a high to watch them walk through their lives and knowing that I may have helped to shape them a little bit.
Precisely. It is a legacy. It is the legacy that we can see. We can't know about our writing.
No.
Uh, I certainly can't know about my acting, but we can see as teachers that yes, we have made a difference.
Thank you both. My name is David Reed. You're watching the Stargate Oral History Project. If you enjoy Stargate and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, please click the like button. It really does help the show grow its audience. And if you want to be notified about future episodes, click subscribe. Thank you to Anthony and Marcia for keeping an eye on everyone for this episode. And we've got a few more heading your way today. Herb Duncanson is joining us in about an hour. He's going to be with us at 12 noon Pacific time. He played Grell, also known as Doug. What was this character's name? It was Douglas Arthurs in the Wormhole Extreme episodes. And then we have an episode of Wormhole Extremists on our other sister channel. And then Allison Matthews, who played Brenna in SG-1's Beneath the Surface, which is SG-1's kind of answer to one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, the first one, Metropolis. She's going to be joining us at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. I appreciate it, and I will see you on the other side.